Welcome to Marketing Monday on July 17th. This is Wins and Fails, the part of the show where we go over the wins and fails in the last week in marketing and business around the globe. And guess what? Normally, right about now, I tell you some boring ass nerd economic statistic about how things are bad. Who cares that stocks are at all-time highs in like 8 companies? Credit access is starting to decline. Rejection rate for loan applications is starting to rise. People are getting rejected from car and auto and home loans at a higher rate than ever before. That's the beginning sign of a credit crunch usually, which is because banks are in an unhealthy spot. And that means it's the early steps of what can eventually lead to large-scale unemployment. Who cares? Ew. Guess what? I don't want to be this guy.
Look, let's establish that there is a huge
economic crisis
headed towards
America.
I don't want to be this guy just nerdily talking about how things might go wrong when everyone else is having a good time and making money. I want to start off by saying maybe it's going to go a different way. Maybe the economy is going to be all right because maybe we have a hero. And I've found that hero. There is one person in the world who has the global presence, the power, the pure clout to raise the economic tides of an entire country or multiple countries. And her fans sound like this.
We were both young when I first saw you. I closed my eyes and the flashback starts. I'm standing there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Taylor Swift might be our best hope to get out of recession. This is a legitimate quote from someone in the Federal Reserve talking about how her Eras Tour, which has a record-breaking $1 billion+ in sales, is so colossal as it tours this country that it is raising tourism revenue everywhere. Everywhere it goes, it's raising local economy spending. It's raising travel spending. It is having a actually measurable, concrete, positive effect around this country. Now, I don't think it's as big as maybe stated here, but it's still notable that someone in the Federal Reserve mentioned it. And it's not just happening in America. Literally, when she added Australia to this tour, economists started saying it can help Australia avoid a recession. I mean, she's literally picking and choosing countries to save. This might be more temporary than a long-term solution, but it is incredible the level of impact she's having as a single artist. And I talked about last week on a smaller scale, the crazy business judo move that she is doing against Scooter Braun, music manager, to re-record her old albums. And in fact, I talked to Cutie Cinderella about it, and she sent me like way more info about the whole thing, which I'm going to include. So I want to talk about this interview that she sent me, which is actually incredible.
Which brings us to Scooter Braun.
All right, so she fucking hates this guy, and he buys the rights to all of her music, basically her first 6 albums, for $300 million without her knowledge.
Borchetta, who worked with Swift for years, says she and those close to her, including her dad, who was an investor, knew about the deal in advance, and that Swift had previously been offered the chance to buy her own masters. She remembers it differently.
And so you didn't see it coming? So how did you find out?
I found out when it was online.
So she gets blindsided for the rights to all of her own music.
I knew he would sell my music. I knew he would do that. I couldn't believe who he sold it to because we've had endless conversations.
To someone that she doesn't like.
And he has 300 million reasons to conveniently forget those conversations.
Boom. So Scooter Braun has 300 million reasons to forget those conversations. But rather than just like many artists saying, wow, this fucking sucks, this industry is pretty predatory to artists. And what happened was they realized, there's nothing stopping me from re-recording the same songs and releasing them as a new version that I completely own the masters to. And she did that. And since last week, we've been able to dive into the numbers. And the numbers are staggering. This is the streaming demand. The blue bars here are the new versions of the album. The red bar are the one that he spent $300 million for. So literally, she's getting 2 or even 3x amount of streams on the new versions, which means all of the money they spent to buy the old versions is looking pretty wasted, especially if she ends up re-recording the last 2 albums they own. So it's actually kind of an incredible move. I'm legitimately impressed from a business POV. And again, we mentioned it last week, but the follow-up is that labels are scrambling because they've sort of been exposed, blindsided by the fact that like the artist, which has all of the fan connection and social media presence, can just tell their fans to stream the new version. That wasn't possible back in the day. And so they have to update their contracts to measure up against. This effect of pop stars on economies is not limited to only Taylor Swift. Let's go check in on Sweden. This is the pictured as the Swedish Prime Minister. Checking out Sweden, you may have noticed they're experiencing pretty high inflation. The price of meatballs continues to rise. And the blame, in their case, was placed entirely on a different pop star, Beyoncé. Swedish economists were saying that Beyonce's concerts in Stockholm were the cause of rising inflation in Sweden because so many people were traveling there to buy things and the demand was so high that it was raising the prices, which got a lot of pickup. I mean, New York Times did a story, The Unexpected Beyoncé Effect, Hotter Inflation. Now, no one followed up though on their stories just a month later when she left the country and inflation kept going. Which sort of proved that maybe Sweden just has a bad inflation problem. So yeah, Beyonce did not cause as much inflation as promised. And in fact, I think a lot of this pop star rhetoric is kind of a covert attempt to place the blame for some of this stuff or credit for some of this stuff on areas away from large corporations and the government, which is where most of it's being driven by. But that's not to say that A-list celebrities don't have a lot of power right now. And in fact, they're in the news for a very important reason, which is the second win of this week. Strike, baby! All 160,000 working actors in Hollywood have gone on strike, with the Screen Actors Guild strike joining the Writers Guild in a dual strike in Hollywood, which has not happened together for 60 years. In fact, the last time that writers and actors struck at the same time, it was led by Ronald fucking Reagan. Who ended up being the worst person for labor movement and union power ever when he became president. He ended up crushing unions altogether and like setting unions on a downward spiral for decades. But at the time when it was in his interests, he actually led the Actors Guild and the Writers Guild in a dual strike that achieved its gains. So nowadays we have someone a little bit better. Okay, we got more important people at the forefront of this strike, like my man Nathan Fielder. Let's summarize what's going on. In May, basically 10,000, 11,000 writers went on strike. And the studios were fine with this. They had known it was coming. They had known writers were getting upset with the way the industry was trending against them, the way streaming was trending against them, the cut they were getting, elimination of writers' rooms. And they had money ready. They had ways around it ready to go. And they were sure they could ride it out. In fact, there was a quote that came out basically saying like, we're going to wait it out until they lose their apartments, lose their houses. And we had a great video from Ron Perlman.
The motherfucker who said, we're going to keep this thing going until people start losing their houses and their apartments. There's a lot of ways to lose your house. Some of it is financial, some of it is karma, and some of it is just figuring out who the said that and where he lives. You wish that on people. You wish that families starve. Be careful, motherfucker. Be really careful.
They did not expect the actors' strike to happen at the same time or to happen so quickly. And that is putting Hollywood in crisis mode. Before actors went on strike, some stuff was shut down for writers, but some stuff was still working. Now, almost everything in Hollywood is shut down. Hollywood is a ghost town right now for work. A lot of upcoming pipeline content is being completely halted for movies, television, streaming services, and now they're in real panic mode. Now they have to figure this out a lot quicker. And so they're doing all sorts of tactics to try and either intimidate striking writers and actors into giving up early, like for example, literally cutting the trees on the lot so that strikers have no shade on the hot day. But in addition, they're threatening they're going to lose their houses. They're talking about having a long time. They're basically trying to get people to be worried economically, so they have to give up and take a bad deal. And there's a lot at stake with this deal. Again, all estimates that I've seen show this is going to be one of the longer strikes that has ever happened in Hollywood because the stakes are so high for both sides. The future of the business has changed rapidly from the days it used to be to now the more streaming era. There is so much potential revenue at stake for all future deals. And one of the big questions in the room is AI. So again, the studio sent the proposal to Screen Actors Guild. Their proposal included the idea that they could scan a background actor using AI, pay them for 1 day's work, and then use their likeness forever with no payment or consent. Literally, you could be a background actor on one film and they would have the rights to use you in a film forever. Including, like, imagine if you're a background actor who later becomes famous, they have your rights forever. I mean, it's Black Mirror-esque, and that's their proposal. So obviously, there's an incredible amount of the future of the industry is at stake, and neither side wants to back down. More than AI and more than any of that, the main thing at stake is money. And when you look at the money, it becomes staggering just how much these Hollywood CEOs who are supposed to be able to handle this kind of situation and aren't, are being paid. The estimated cost of buying contracts from Screen Actors Guild and Writers Guild is estimated between $450 million and $600 million a year. That's what it would take to completely solve this problem for the studios. Guess what? David Zaslav, head of the great idea to turn HBO Max into Max, gets paid $495 million a year by himself to ruin a company. And Bob Iger, a man that I've talked about before, makes $200 million on his own. And I think shareholders, you start asking the question, why are we paying these guys so much? If they can't even solve this problem, why don't we just give the money to these writers and get the production working again and have the companies working? Because right now, revenue is going to dry up if they can't make new content. And so I saw this thread. So this guy, Nick Pappas, basically said, it's easy to get mad at Ted Sarandos or David Zaslav or Bob Iger, but they get paid so much because their only job is to make rich people richer. The guilds aren't fighting against rich CEOs. They're fighting against an entire system designed to exploit workers. A-list actors get paid so much because they're worth it. Someone has done the math. Again, people are more likely to go see the movie. You don't have a poster of Bob Iger hanging up in your room. And that's where I needed to stop him. Because I agree with everything this guy said. It's unfortunate one part of his thread was wrong. And this feels pretty tone deaf. I feel like I can't in good conscience have this hanging up. Especially because the average union member makes $26,000 a year compared to Bob Iger's $195 million. But also because Bob Iger, he basically said that like the demands were not being realistic. That the writers and actors, which were asking for basically not even much more than they were already getting in the previous system, were not being realistic. And so Fran Drescher, head of the Screen Actors Guild, basically said, incredibly repugnant, incredibly tone deaf. And if I were Disney, I would lock him behind doors. Bob Iger's sort of been on a couple L takes lately, especially because he had ridden off into the sunset. You know what I'm saying? Bob Iger made Disney climb from a mid player against the streamers to launching the second biggest streamer, taking over Marvel, taking over Star Wars, big acquisitions. He had a good run. He left on top. Disney stock was up. Then he came back for Tour, and Tour 2 has not been good. And so, if you look at Disney stock in the past 6 months, it's down pretty significantly in response to the writer's strike. What we're starting to notice as the actors' strike becomes a very real thing that Wall Street's now pricing in is that some media companies are doing a lot better than others, and Disney's taking the worst of it. Netflix, on the other hand, is like at all-time highs. Netflix is responding extremely well to the actors' strike, and it's weird. And if you look into the divergence, a lot of it is because Netflix has built a system where they can exploit labor from other countries to make media. Netflix is going to make 10x more South Korean shows and videos while Disney is unable to. If you read this article, it's filled with some absolutely horrendous quotes about the level of work expected in South Korea. They have understaffed production teams working 20-hour days, forgetting whether it's day or night, working all the time. Crank out shows that, again, Netflix takes all the upside on, and the creators of the show in Korea get almost nothing because they don't have a strong union there. But I do want to say this divergence in stock prices is the beginning of getting the studios to finally break apart. This is how it worked in the last writer's strike. CBS in the last writer's strike was doing worse than the other studios and eventually started to make some breaks with David Letterman's deal and things like that to get writers back on the payroll. And what we need to have happen now is the same thing. Somebody has to break because if all the studios are united, they have more money and they have more time. But if some start doing worse than the others, they will break first and they will sign a deal that makes sense. And then the other ones have to do it to keep up. So what we really want is Disney to break. And right now it's looking like they may have to. Bob Iger went from the champion conquering hero who's making Disney bigger and better, and is now looking like he may be even thinking of selling the company or sell its assets, sell Disney Plus altogether. Streaming has been a huge money-losing venture for Disney so far. And they're looking to find a way to get back to making consistent, stable profits and selling toys and doing theme parks and merch. So it's interesting. I mean, this remains to be seen. Again, we're in early days of what I think is going to be a long strike, but this is the fault line you sort of want to watch, is which streamers are in a weaker position and eventually have to break. But the main question that I see when I look at Twitter is people just asking, how does this affect me and my favorite shows? Is my favorite actor still going to be at Comic-Con? Like, people don't seem to care, even though this is a pretty large, like, fulcrum for the labor movement. Like, this is a big deal that has a lot of implications for future labor movement action. And the answer is you're going to see a lot more of this. Right now, every studio is greenlighting a fuck ton of reality TV because reality TV is like the only thing that really gets around that requires no writers and no actors. This is going to be everywhere. I mean, this is going to be what you're going to see pushed. This and foreign-made content, largely from like South Korea and places that have sort of established mini Hollywoods, you know? That's what you're gonna see, because that's where they can still reliably create things. And that's what we're gonna try and hold you down with to get through the lack of new big screen releases from major actors and writers. Now, that being said, if this type of content is rising, I was thinking, who's gonna be the big star that fills the gap? If Tom Cruise and Cillian Murphy and Margot Robbie can't go do promotions and they can't do movies, who's gonna be the star that fills the gap in this weird, lawless, no actors, no writers environment? And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, if I look at the trends, there's really only one woman, Pinky Doll. Her trademark catchphrase, ice cream so good.
Ice cream so good. Ugh.
This is the new superstar. This is our new queen. Gang, gang, rise up. Because she has legitimately turned what was like a weird live stream NPC talk kind of thing for making, at the start, she made like $250 a day, which is pretty incredible for what she was doing. But now she's making something like $100,000 a month. This has not become something to make fun of her. This is becoming where she's grown fucking drastically. And so there's a video that kind of explains that I want to watch. Pretty short. We'll watch this and just get into it.
TikToker Pinky Doll
the
has
gacha game model, yes.
NPC streams in which she impersonates video game NPC characters by acting out various idle animations and responding when she gets a gift. During the streams, she says a specific word or phrase or performs a particular action depending on the gift she gets, resulting in a bizarre word soup when taken out of context.
Hee-haw, yes, you got me feeling like a cowgirl. Are you ready? It's time.
She also makes popcorn and opens and closes a hair straightener to add another attention-grabbing element to the streams. Cherry Crush is
It's so funny because originally it was humans saying something real, and then we put like Subway Surfers in the corner to keep the brain going. And then eventually people realized that all they wanted was the Subway Surfers. So humans are giving up the real part altogether and becoming the Subway Surfers. And just cutting out the content altogether. Anyway, this is the end game of all content, but I want to say, clearly a star has emerged because Pinky Doll is getting 750,000 likes. She's got like at one point a million views on a live stream, and the top viewer was music producer Timbaland. So I am not surprised if within a few months we have a fucking Pinky Doll Song of the Summer, Gang Gang, or a Pinky Doll fucking Netflix show. Anyway, I'm impressed that they're getting this dough. I am a little worried about humanity, but if NPC talk is the future, NPC talk is the future. And speaking of NPCs, who owns 98% of all video game NPCs now? Our fourth consecutive winner, Microsoft. Because Microsoft has basically all but in name only, completed their acquisition of Activision Blizzard. The FTC's appeal has been denied, and that leaves just one country left, the UK Competitive Markets Authority, as the holdout. And even that, it seems, has been bullied into backtracking. Very likely they'll reach a deal. In fact, I watched today, this morning, I woke up early to watch the live streamed UK CMA hearing between Microsoft and the UK. And unfortunately, I was going to record it and include it in this video until this popped up. You can still see my Hitman speedrun live split on the right. And then I figured, well, I don't want to get in trouble with the law on this one. So I have officially deleted the recording. Don't worry. The gist of it was clear that the UK is willing to back down. They don't want to be the only country out. And Microsoft does not want to go through with the deal until the UK is part of it. They don't want to actually split off Activision into Activision UK or something weird. So the deal has been delayed. It's going to close later than planned. They were going to try and close like by tomorrow, but instead it's going to be a few more weeks or even a month. But it seems very likely it will happen. And again, there's a lot I want to say about this. I've talked about it in the previous Marketing Monday. Immediately after the deal was like pretty much confirmed in the US, they already started doing an Xbox only Call of Duty sale, which is like trademark undercutting. Like they're doing instant, like classic Monopoly techniques instantly on like important inputs. Call of Duty is like a third of the video game market on consoles, and they're immediately doing price cuts for Xbox users only. Even though they offered deals to to Nintendo and Sony, it's incredible that like they're already doing what they said they sort of like wouldn't even think about doing. Again, Lee Hepner here writes, not just Microsoft Blizzard, but in general, that when content creators, basically like game studios, merge with the distributors, it's always been bad. Like back in the early days of Hollywood, they had to break up studio system where the studios owned theaters. Because if you own distribution and creation, it gives you so much power to like basically force users to watch crap. Also, Microsoft initially offered Sony a deal that included all Activision console titles on Sony, including future versions of Call of Duty. But the second they they won against the FTC, they pulled that deal and offered them a worse deal. Which again, I mean, they just completely are saying the opposite of what they're going to do in court and then doing different. And no one seems to follow up or care from the government. And so Sony has signed the new deal. They have Call of Duty only now for 10 years. And maybe it's bad, maybe it's good. You know, we'll see. We'll find out. At first, obviously, for all of these reasons, I was against it. But then I thought about one thing. This leak. StarCraft 3 is in development, bro. Let's go! Microsoft money makes StarCraft 3. Poggies, poggies, poggies. I'm a consumer. Who cares about Monopoly, bro? Big win! That brings us to the final segment of Wins and Fails. An illustrious, noble segment, known for its powerful geopolitical takes. Let's go to my man Xi Jinping for a segment I like to call... What's up, Beijing? And you know what's up in Beijing? Youth unemployment. Actually, not so pog. In fact, 1 in 5 job seekers among 16 to 24-year-olds in China cannot find a job. Staggeringly high, record high, 21.3% youth unemployment rate in China. The recovery that was promised after they opened up after COVID, because again, China had the world's strictest COVID lockdowns. Mandatory testing, people locked in their homes, restricted access outdoors. After they opened that up, the expectation would be there would be this massive surge in tourism, travel, spending, buying, factories opening, and that has not really emerged. The economic growth has been a lot slower than expected, and that has caused a big problem for people that are graduating right now in China and trying to find a job. And so this article, which I'm sort of deep diving on today, talks about China's full-time children, they're called. That's the word for it in China, where people are either giving up overworked jobs or unable to find a job and living with their parents and just becoming, quote, full-time daughters or full-time sons. The 29-year-old now spends her days washing dishes, preparing meals for her parents, and doing other household chores. Her parents pay for most of the daily expenses, but she refused their offer of a monthly wage. The main things here are either burnt out, jobless, or stuck. And it's worse in China than it is here simply because of one system, which is called the 996 work culture, where they're expected to work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That is the standard work culture for a lot of these competitive jobs in China, which is burning people out so much they are quitting the workforce. So again, when I say youth unemployment is 21%, that's already really high. That's of people who are looking for jobs. There's also a huge cadre of young Chinese citizens who are not looking for jobs because they burnt out and quit. The level of work is insane. And again, she's working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and said she has barely anything left for paying rent. And that's with living with her parents. I sort of related to this part where she said when she moved back in with her parents, she started to live the life of a retiree, but anxiety began creeping up on her. She had 2 voices in her head. One is saying it's rare to have this leisure, so just enjoy the moment. And the other is urging you to think about what to do next. And I think we, or probably even more you guys than me, can relate to that, where it's like you have these 2 competing pulls to like, hey, I want to enjoy life a bit. I want to take a break and I want to enjoy myself. But then you have the anxiety in the back of your head of like, I have to earn money. I have to like find a way to grow. I always have to be improving or increasing my earnings or whatever. So I want to include this because I think, again, one of the goals of What's Up Beijing, this segment, is to make China seem more accessible and relatable and understandable, even if I disagree a lot with government decisions. Some of them I do agree with. I want to make the average citizen realize that like most people are the same. And again, the memes there are out of control. So Chinese social media is filled with memes of people basically taking graduation photos and pretend like the grimace shake. Memes on Chinese TikToks are basically about how you graduate and then you're dead. Because there's no options for jobs. The situation is quite bad. People are tired and many are trying to opt out. There's a lot of despair, which is not that funny. But what I want to say is China tells a different story. The government tells a different story. They're not calling it unemployment. They're calling it slow employment. And basically the Chinese government is downplaying the whole thing and saying that people are actively choosing to opt for slow employment, which is that they're taking their time to find jobs, they're traveling, and they're taking a gap year. And so that, interesting way to look at it, that wasn't really resonating. A lot of people on Chinese social media before it got deleted were saying things like, this is not the case, I can't find a job, etc. An even better solution emerged from Xi Jinping himself, who basically said, if you can't find a job, you need to learn how to eat bitterness. And they're basically talking up the virtue of hardship. Basically, like the fact that you can't find a job is going to make you a tougher person. That's the grind set, dude. That is why China, we can't beat them. They have more high-speed rail than us. They're grinding. in the West, and especially in America, we have record low unemployment right now. Now, I don't think the quality of the jobs are as high as people say, and I think there's some cracks under the surface. But right now, we have low unemployment. If you want a job, there's a lot of postings available. But layoffs and jobless claims have started to tick up. It's a number I keep bringing up because people seem to want to ignore it. 92% of Americans live in a state with higher continuing jobless claims than the previous month. If this were to happen here, I don't know what our policy would be. I don't know what our solution, I don't know what our version of eat bitterness and slow unemployment is. I'm interested to find out because I do feel like we are trending in the wrong direction on unemployment. And that is until I thought of the perfect solution to all of our problems. The Eras Tour 2. And the economy is saved! If we just have Taylor Swift never stop touring, if she never stops working like a Christ-like figure, she can save all of our economies. Just travel the world and never stop touring. So hopefully we can use that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of this week's Marketing Monday. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the wins and fails. And I'll see you next week for another edition of Marketing Monday.
Check it.